So my job now is to, and I'm very much, I hope, on behalf of those members of the Good Governance Forum who are here and who are listed on that slide and who are shown on the back of the board mandate piece, is to bridge Mervyn's introduction with that of Sir Malcolm Williamson on the case for the board mandate. Is Sir Malcolm here, or is he about to? Excellent, sorry, I didn't see he's there. So I can do this relaxed, knowing that seamlessly we will integrate. That's fantastic. So on the one hand, we have this pretty high-level thinking about the future of the planet and corporate governance. On the other hand, we have this Good Governance Forum seeking to create instruments and tools to help improve the quality of corporate governance with and for key actors in the boardroom, in particular, but not only, company chairmen like Sir Malcolm, from whom we will hear shortly. You have the brochure, and on the inside of the brochure you have the kind of systems map which sets out the agenda that we are following through the forum. And I just draw that to your attention now because I'll be referring to it later, so you may want to use that as a kind of navigation tool as we go through. And you have the case for the board mandate with its toolkit, which we will be sharing with you. And it's really great that Mervyn has already started to talk you through what a board mandate is and to prepare you for some of the working group exercise that you will be doing later. So in doing that bridging role, and let me just see that this slide doohickey works. I didn't press it. Did you press it, Eagle? Did I press it? No. You pressed it. Can you leave me to press it? Sorry, seamless. Can you go back a slide? So in setting out this agenda and in thinking about governance in these terms, but with a focus of this very practical set of outputs, with an outcome of helping to improve the quality of corporate governance, I think we want to get to the point where we're not just thinking, what are we against or what are we uncomfortable with, i.e. regulation, and to recognise the importance and the responsibility of the boardroom in not only improving quality of its own performance, but in being seen to, but also thinking, what are we for? And that's why we're sharing with you the argument around the stewardship economy, broadening the theme of stewardship from the relationship between the boardroom and the investment community to that of the economy as a whole. So we've talked about the challenges facing business, people and planet, and I pressed a button here which hasn't yet revealed the next slide, so I'm saying that in a way that carries over on that. And for us, the critical thing there is to understand that those issues and those stresses that Mervyn touched on are set in the context of those three great subsystems on which we all depend for life and prosperity. And somehow if we lose that context, if we lose the sight of that, then you kind of have to say what's business for, and is profit on its own a sufficient driver? Because the critical point about how all of these issues relate is it's not just the stress within one subsystem, but it's the fact one's knocking onto the other, and it's the cumulative pressures that that faces. And can a board and can an investor think to the medium, let alone the long-term future, and think, as Mervyn outlined with Coca-Cola and other examples, that business success can be delivered, shareholder return can be delivered without attending to this wider agenda. This data is familiar to you, but it's just worth pausing and taking stock of some of the extraordinary changes that are happening around us. New countries being created, banks failing, 11 countries with a public debt in excess of their GDP, using over 1.5 planets worth of resources, rising to 2, heading towards 3 and beyond, 1.4 billion living in poverty, a population of 9 billion, and a population of over 65 likely to double. What does all of that add up to? For us, it adds up to thinking about the economists' argument around entering a new long wave of economic development. that something very profound is changing here. And it's not just about the constraints of this change. It's about the sustainability pressures. It's about the opportunity, the new agenda for business and value creation that opens up. The post-war boom and period has rested fundamentally on two sets of assumptions. One set Mervyn described very well around natural resources. We used to think they're abundant, they're now scarce. They're either scarce in absolute terms or in their cost or on their impact of usage. And if they're not now, then they will be. But the other key assumption is around talent. It's about how we thought about it. We thought there was a war for talent. We thought it was scarce. And our view is it's all around us. It's latent. It's within us. It's there to be inspired and harnessed. It exists globally. It's coming through at massive and epic scale from emerging economies. And the real challenge of the future is how we bring those two things together, how we harness that talent to deal with those constraints, but also create new business and new wealth for the long term. So that's why we describe the age of sustainability in those classic terms of a new wave of economic development, and very much bearing in mind a comment that the Stone Age did not come to an end because we ran out of stones. Something much more profound shifted there. And we need to come to terms with that and reflect on that, because we're still using the mindsets, the policy tools of the old economic era as we think about those of the new. In that context, therefore, we would profoundly argue that we need to go beyond thinking simply in terms of the triple bottom line, but we need to think about the integration of value through the economic, the social and the environmental, and the interdependency of those subsystems as being the safe place to be, the exciting place to be in terms of creating new value. And looking at the contribution, again, from South Africa, fascinatingly, why wouldn't companies consider all those factors which impact on the long-term value of companies? Surely not to do so is to take the more higher risk approach in valuation. Why is it that we're locked into a mindset which simply sees short-term economic value as the safe, as the confident, as the guiding place to be? So from our perspective, business is a force for good for its own self-interest, because that way lies future success. American environmentalists are a fascinating breed because they embrace capitalism with a heart and an energy and a vigour that you don't see this side of the pond. So those first two quotes of the absolute guru of this space, Paul Hawken, were worth taking into account, because people over here think, Paul Hawken, environmentalist, he didn't really say that, did he? What was he on when he said it? He didn't mean that, did he? Was he serious? He did. He believes it. And Paul Polman from Unilever, growth and sustainability have to be parts of the same whole, and driving a transformation of a massive and important business and business model as a result. Mervyn talked about the other Mervyn King. So I just share that quote with you for you to take in. It's worth, in the furor that it's raised, just taking note that Stephen King said much the same thing, actually, a year ago. He may have said some other things which set it in a slightly different context, I admit that, acknowledge that. But nevertheless, it's interesting to see how, in its time, that link between values and value creation is so important, but also so challenging. And I suspect we will hear more from that in the context of the Lord Mayor's initiative on restoring trust in the city. So it's in that context that we talk about corporate governance. Yes, it's about procedures and accountability and practices. Yes, absolutely, as Barry said, it starts with the combined code's excellent definition around entrepreneurial and prudent management. But it also needs to think about what's it all for, what's it all about, what's the wider agenda that we are addressing. So the framework that we're following is looking at these various issues. It's looking at them in turn, but also as interlinked pieces of a jigsaw. We have heard about, and we'll hear further around, the board mandate, and look forward to that with Sir Malcolm in a few moments. Next, we're looking at the boardroom conversation, seeing the mandate as a conversation as two interrelated pieces of the whole. But as soon as you start talking about the conversation, how do boards make decisions? What judgments do they form and how do they do so? You have to talk about the composition at the board. You have to talk about key roles around the board. And this gets us into quite a complicated, reflective piece of work. How do boards ensure they go from being good to great? How they deal with the pressures and challenges they're facing? How do they take account of the different kinds of decision they have to take a view on, from operational decisions to strategic and transformational decisions? How they have the right people in the room playing the right roles in order to do that? That's not always easy, and it requires some reflection to ensure that it's done well. So in working our way through that agenda, we now want to also think about the stewardship economy, a framing that we used for the Good Governance Forum and Tomorrow's Companies contribution to a long-term focus for corporate Britain, the BIS consultation. Thinking about these key elements and thinking then about what might the building blocks be of the stewardship economy, strategic and systemic risk, celebrating companies as engines of value creation, getting beyond this rather curious Western framing that we've gotten ourselves into, which is rather apologetic and profoundly defensive around business. The primacy to long-term value creation, recognising that success, as Tata would argue, is about building economic, social and environmental capital, challenging our Fortress Britain culture and mentality, and building the capacity to bring private and public sector together in new fora which thinks about the scale of the challenges that we are facing and addresses how best to do that. These are some of the elements that Mervyn has outlined, and we would very much endorse, and Mark Goyder will be going through in more detail in a few moments, around the policy framework for the stewardship economy. The fiduciary duty, the role of asset managers, stock exchange listing roles, the importance of corporate reporting, and critically, in terms of what we're going to discuss next, the board mandate as a bridge between the combined code and the stewardship code. So that's our agenda. We very much hope it will become your agenda and that you will value the day that you have so generously given up to us. I now have the great pleasure of introducing Sir Malcolm Williamson. If we are to think about the Good Governance Forum as developing practical instruments and tools which will help key actors in the boardroom, and in particular chairmen, then you surely can't get much better than somebody who was Group Chief Executive at Standard Chartered, was President and CEO of Visa International, was Chairman of National Australia Group, Clydesdale Bank PLC, National Australia Bank, Chairman of Friends Provident Holdings, Signet Jewellers, and Cass Business School, and many other voluntary organisations. How he combines that all, it's probably actually because he has good mandates or has established them. But we will hear immediately from Sir Malcolm. If I can just say this in introducing you, you have been a fantastic friend, a wonderful source of critical challenge in the very best sense of governance for our work as the Good Governance Forum. You're a member of the Chairman's Board, and you have been an extraordinary support as we have been starting to introduce this concept of the mandate to other chairmen. So, Sir Malcolm, it is a great honour and privilege on behalf of the Forum as a whole to ask that you introduce the case for the board mandate.